Hey, what's up guys, it's BenBonk and recently I entered the Brackeys Game Jam 2020.2. This jam was different for me because I was actually going to be working with another game dev who was Yannick. The plan was that he would take the lead on programming and I could take the lead on art. And this would also be the first ever week-long game jam I've ever entered. So let's get into it. The jam started at 6 AM for me on Saturday the 1st and I was not waking up at 6 AM. So when I finally woke up, I checked the jam page and the theme was Rewind. I thought this was a tough theme, and to be honest, I didn't really like it that much. Compared to other jams I'd entered in the past, this theme felt much more restricting and less open to me, and I felt like the only thing I could think of rewinding was time. So I hopped in a call with Yannick and we started brainstorming ideas. And after a bit of brainstorming, we came up with this idea. Basically, you'll have multiple characters in a dungeon setting, and the goal is to get one of the characters to the end of the level. You can choose which order you send in these characters, and they'll have special abilities like how the builder can build paths and the knight can kill enemies. There will also be a timer, and once that timer runs out, the character will rewind itself, and you can choose another character to play as. Then you can see the first character you played as do his actions, and use them to complete the level. And there will also be levers and pressure plates that you have to use to unlock the door at the end of the level. It's kind of hard to explain, but it'll become more clear when you see it in action. Since I was going to be making the art for this game, I started off by working on a tile set. I tried making this from scratch, but after many failed versions, it just wasn't looking right. Obviously because it wasn't green. But for real though, I decided not to make this game green because I just felt like the dungeon I imagined wouldn't feel right in a green color palette, and I would just really need more colors to make things clear. But don't worry, I'm not abandoning the green color palette, I just kind of wanted to change for once and a break from staring at green all day. But getting back on track, I still don't think I'm the best at making tile sets, so I actually decided to use a tile set tutorial from Adam C. Eunice. Now, I usually don't like to use step-by-step tutorials for pixel art, but I just wanted to try to make this tile set look as good as possible because I knew it'd be a very big factor in the game's overall appearance. And I have to give it to Adam, it was an amazing tutorial and I learned so much not only about pixel art but also Sprite. So after many hours and many scrap versions, I came up with this. I was really happy with it, but not ecstatic because it's basically a copy of the tutorial, but I still thought it looked really nice. The next day, I made a few more necessary tiles and set them up with Unity's rule tile system, and I'm really glad I did this because after a few minutes I could draw all sorts of structures super quickly and I wouldn't have to manually draw levels, which in the end probably ended up saving Yannick and I many hours. But not everything was perfect, because as you can see, some of these inside kind of corner tiles were still kind of messed up and they just didn't look really natural at all. And so I hopped into Sprite, drew a few more tiles, and now everything was looking much more natural and not out of place. Later that same day, I decided to start working on the main player art as I was really burned out from messing around with tiles for way too long. And the plan was to have this guy have no special abilities and just be a human, but have him just be able to run and jump. Here's what this guy ended up looking like. He still needs some arms and some tweaks, but it was a good start. With all this art done, you're probably wondering what Yannick was doing on the programming side, and unfortunately he wasn't able to work much the first few days, but he did start on the rewind system. As you can see, you can play as the ball, and after a few seconds the ball starts to rewind and goes back to its original position. But getting back to art, I started working on the art for the knight character, and the plan for the knight was to give him the ability to attack and kill enemies. So in some levels you have to send in the knight to kill an enemy, and then exit the level with the human, which seems like a pretty cool idea. So the last thing I did that day was to start to work on the art for the builder character. The plan for this guy was to make him where you could place blocks and paths to help other characters progress to the level, but I just didn't think he fit the art style, so I ended up scrapping him and just called it a day. The next day, I started working on a new version for this builder character and make him look more like a dwarf and kind of like this medieval kind of dungeon builder. And I'm really happy how this guy turned out. I think it's some of my best work in this whole entire game, and I think he looks super small and just really good. And at the end of this work section, he ended up looking like this. I sent it to Yannick for some feedback. I realized I should add some arms, but still, I think he looked really good. By now we're at the 4th day of the jam, and this was the day that Yannick could really start working on the project. He made some more tweaks to the replay system, and now is much more set up, and we also had animations for our main character. Now, you may be wondering, when did you make these animations? Well, I actually made them all the day before, but while recording my power went out, and whenever I try to open the video file, I just get this. So, yeah. The same day, I started working on a bunch of background elements for the game, which would be kind of like polish and add a bit more depth to the game. So I made some banners, skulls, a ton of different stuff, just to enhance the overall polish of the game and make it look more like a dungeon. So at the end of all that, here's what this looked like. I thought it looked pretty good. There's a bunch of just small things, but I knew at the end it would probably make the game look much better overall. I also ended up making a knight attack animation so the knight could actually do something and have a special ability, which was just super simple but pretty nice. And by this point, Yannick has already started working on getting the knight into the game, so as you can see, you can select him and run and jump around with him with a button, and eventually he will start rewinding, and you can go to select Jerry, and then it's basically the core mechanic of the game, and you can see him actually doing his inputs in real time. Later that day, this knight also needed an enemy to attack, so I thought I could make a kind of dungeon goblin, just something that would seem kind of fitting in this scenario. So I started working on this goblin kind of guy, and I think he looks pretty good. He's just a simple goblin, and he has this kind of dagger, and he can run towards you and try to stab you. But yeah, that's what he looked like. Then the next day rolled around, making the 5th day of the jam, and when I woke up, Yannick had got the knight attack and the goblin working. It's a really simple goblin script from what I can tell. As you can see, now you can just attack this goblin, kill him, and then use him to help Jerry get over the path safely. Right now, we had a cast of 3 characters, but the plan was to also have at least maybe 2 more, have a total of 5. We ended up actually not using all these characters, as you'll see later, but I spent a bunch of time making this kind of ninja character, and the plan was for this guy to have him where he could wall jump, so we could make some cool puzzles with that, and so, maybe you'll have to get over some place where you have to wall jump, and only the ninja can make it past a certain jump. Another character that we didn't really end up using in the final game was the mage, and I made this guy, and the plan was to have him where you could have this kind of wizard staff, and you could shoot flying enemies. But we just felt like we didn't have time, we had enough characters, so we didn't really end up importing him, but I thought I'd talk about him anyway, and he's basically just a rip-off of my game, Fulcrum Frenzy, with a bit of a change on the color palette. Next up, I made some switches and some slight animations for them, and just also some pressure plates, which would be a kind of core part of the game. And I know I'm talking a lot about art, but the final thing I did was I actually ended up adding a white outline to every single sprite in the game. And I thought this would look really good because right now the kind of characters would just kind of blend in with a dark background and things didn't really look good at all. And I'm really glad I did this white outline at the end because it made everything pop. I think it changes the art a ton in a really good way. By now I've been working on art all day long and I really just needed a break from all that time in Sprite. So I hopped into Unity and I started to make these kind of cards for the characters, which would kind of make them look really good overall, I think, and much more polished than the last default buttons. So basically, these are the cards I can press to select which characters to use and which order. Not the best work actually in my opinion, but still definitely an improvement from Unity's default buttons. And later that night, I decided to actually take it upon myself to make the switch and pressure plate system. So I hopped into Unity again, started writing some code, really basic code, that just checks if you've pressed all the pressure plates and all the switches in the level, and if it does, it'll unlock a door. Didn't take me that long to do this, but it was a really simple system that worked. So here's what this looked like at the end. You can see I can select Jerry, hop on a pressure plate, rewind time, then play as the knight, press the switch, and once all those conditions have been met, the door will open with this nice animation. That was the end of work for me for that day, but I woke up the next day and Yannick had made some decent progress. He added some more clarity to the UI, made a timer, made a countdown, just some really nice effects of polish. And he also imported the ninja, though we really didn't end up using them. By now, there were only 2 days left in the jam and we had a ton to still do. So I started off by making a builder animation, so when he actually starts to place blocks, he places and kind of swings his hammer down, just a nice piece of polish there. By now we had the foundations for our game set and all the mechanics working, but we still had no levels. So Yannick and I spent the next few hours grinding out and pumping out levels. And making levels is what I pretty much did all day long. We tried to make levels where it'd start off easy and get harder as it goes on, and you can also meet characters as you go on to make the challenge more interesting and not get stale over time. After quite a bit of work, Yannick and I had about 8 levels in total, some easy, some hard. It was really easy to make hard levels actually with this because we can imagine all the different challenging levels we can make, but we've had to make easier levels just to make sure they're not too difficult and the players don't get too angry. But then towards the end, I also got kind of stale and tired of working on levels, so I did some other things. Those other things being, I made a start screen, which was really simple with some start and credits button. I also made a credit scene, which you can just view the credits and who made this game. And we also made a cutscene, kind of, which you can have some backstory for the game, which pretty much shows how Jerry is trapped in the dungeon, Jerry being the name of our main character, and he wants to get out of this dungeon. That's what I did for the 6th day, and there's only 1 day left in the jam, and we still had so much to do. See, originally my plan for this jam was to have a really nice and relaxed jam, and that's why I was also teaming up with Yannick and in making sure it was a week-long jam, so I wouldn't have to be as stressed out. But all that was just thrown right out the door on this last final day. While Yannick was busy, I started out the day with some more level design and just tweaking some more levels. But once Yannick got on, he had some issues with me committing my scene changes in GitHub, and apparently our git ignore file randomly decided to ignore Unity scene files, which literally make up the game, so that was a kind of a pain and took up an hour of our time. Then we got straight back into even more level design. I know it sounds like I'm talking like this a lot, but it just takes up so much time testing and trying to get levels just right. And after a few more levels, we thought we had enough levels in the game, so I started working on some background and polish. Pretty much what I had to do is go through every single level, add background elements, add post-processing, add scene transitions, add all that kind of stuff that actually makes the level flow, and Yannick was working on some more code related things. I also made some quick sound effects and got them set up, and during this whole entire process, Gizmodude was actually in the background working on a soundtrack for the game. He made 4 different versions for each different kind of character. It's a really cool effect, and so a huge shout out to Gizmodude for actually ending up making the music for this game. I can't thank him enough, and he's a great jam partner, so make sure to check him out if you'd like. By around 2 o'clock, we had a sort of working game, but there was still a lot to do. We added an in-screen, better scene transitions, and decided to name the game Divided Dungeon, referring to how the characters feel divided from each other. Now the plan was to export the game and send it over to some friends for playtesting, but unfortunately that's where this day got even worse. Pretty much when Yannick and I tried to build the game to WebGL and run the game, it would load perfectly and then just get stuck at the 90% mark and never continue finishing loading. This was incredibly annoying because we really wanted to get the game to WebGL to be more accessible to everyone, but for some reason it just wasn't loading and we had no clue why. And we couldn't even tell where the problem was coming from. Was it a problem with Unity? Was it a problem with our code? Was it a problem with post-processing? Was it a problem with WebGL? It just all made no sense. Then Yannick and I spent the next few hours just trying to fix this issue and trying to figure out where it was coming from. Together we made so many different builds, tweaking one small thing each time, but it just still wasn't working, and it didn't help that it took like 10 minutes to build a WebGL project and actually upload it, which made our process much slower to try to figure out where the problem was coming from. Then Yannick did a desktop build, and it turns out the desktop build was working. It was just a problem with WebGL, which made no sense. By now we had totally scrapped the fact of playtesting, and eventually Yannick had to go to bed. I was totally convinced that we weren't going to get a WebGL build out, until I started messing around aimlessly inside the export settings of Unity and decided to change the compression format from broadly to disabled. I have absolutely no clue why I decided to do this and why this fixed the issue, but for some reason, now our WebGL builds worked. After this, I was extremely happy but also exhausted and quickly made an itch page for Yannick and headed off to bed. And while I was asleep, Yannick added a level select, imported the music, made some cool rewind effects and a few other things, and submitted the game 4 minutes before the deadline. Overall, I'm super happy with the game we made, and so thank you so much Yannick and Gizmodude for teaming up with me on this one. The feedback on this game has been mostly positive so far, with some good points of criticism, so yeah, if you want to play the game, go ahead. It's the first link in the description, and if you like this video and you want to see more, make sure to maybe drop me a sub or a like, and that would be massively appreciated. That's all I really have to say. I hope you guys like this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.